Hello, everyone. Welcome to our family session this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really looking forward to the day of rich discussion and interaction and questions and answers. Before we get started, I'd like to read a land acknowledgement. We recognize that we are on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq peoples. This territory is covered by the Treaties of Peace and Friendship, 1725. The treaties did not include surrender of lands and resources. Instead, they recognized Mi'kmaq and Maliseet title in Mi'kma'ki. We are all treaty people. We also recognize the historic contributions and legacies of Black Nova Scotians, African Nova Scotians, who have been here well over 400 years. We had an amazing day yesterday. I know many of you were there, and I'm so grateful. We had almost 1,200 people involved, from attendees in person or online, speakers and volunteers. So we want to continue that rich dialogue today with this session that's specifically for families. I'd like to welcome back our amazing MC from yesterday, Anna MacQuarrie, and our disability leaders, Eddie Bartnik and Dr. Tim Stainton. Today's session is for families. It's a place for families to share their hopes and fears and learn more about the remedy. Before I send the things over to Anna for a few brief remarks, I have a few housekeeping items. And I just realized I didn't introduce myself, so I'm going to back it up. I'm Maria Medioli. Oh, okay, yeah. Well, there you go. There's a photo of me in the wind, and there's a photo of Anna. I'm Maria Medioli, the Executive Director of the Disability Support Program. So back to my housekeeping items. We are recording this session so we can share it with everyone later, and eventually I believe this is going on the government YouTube channel. We're going to take questions for the panel later and questions for Eddie and Tim. So don't worry, there will be an opportunity to ask questions. We will do that through the chat function on Zoom. There will be a chat function at the bottom of the screen, and you can submit your questions. We will have people moderating the questions, and they will provide them to Tim and our panelists. And I believe there's a slide. Oh, okay. We have over 250 people tuning in today, so we can't get to all your questions. We will be prioritizing questions from family. If you are not a family member, we would ask that you listen and not participate, as this session is for families. As yesterday, we will take all the questions and then prepare answers and report back as part of our post-conference report. So if we don't get to your question today, we will eventually through that post-conference report. So now I'd like to introduce Anna, who's going to say a few words.
Thanks, Maria. Good morning, everyone. It's a real honor and privilege to be here. Yesterday was a really fantastic day, and I'm excited to keep the conversation going and amazed that there's 250 people online today. I think that says a lot about our excitement about this. So I've worn a lot of hats during the remedy process, but today I'm wearing my most important hat to me, my parent hat. As a parent to 3 kids with disabilities, my greatest hope for the remedy is that it gives us a chance to build an inclusive life and community for our kids. To be honest, before the remedy, I didn't think this would be possible. I often joke that I had to quit my paid human rights work to stay home and do my human rights work, because in 2019, I had to step out of the labor market to stay home. Keeping 3 kids with disabilities in school and in our community became my full-time job. It feels like I spend most of my time fighting with school, fighting with summer camps, fighting for support, then not being able to find staff to deliver on the support I've now had to fight for. Counting on the remedy is going to require a leap of faith, to believe in systems and communities that let us down almost every day. The beauty in the remedy is that it is broad transformation, and families know well how desperately needed that transformation is. And families need each other. We are in this together, and we always have been. Where did I learn about which community center had the best swim-in structures for kids with disabilities? From a mom. Where did I learn about Pause for Literacy at the local public library? Another mom. We've been a lifeline to each other and will continue to be as the big questions of the remedy arise. We'll need places to come together to network, share our stories, strategize, strengthen our vision for inclusion. We need to be valued and seen as leaders and partners for inclusion. I see today as a new start in this discussion, and I'm really thrilled to be here with all of us. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for hosting this day.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Eddie Bartnik, and along with Tim, who's sitting alongside me, we were the authors of the Remedy Report. I'm going to do just a couple of introductory comments and then the first part of sort of setting out the remedy, and then Tim's going to pick up the what this means for families and also the support that's available. It was quite funny yesterday at the conference. One of the participants made a joke about Tim and I being such a good tag team, like a wrestling tag team. We're sort of back and forth, and that's pretty much how we worked on the remedy, so that's how we'll do today. So just some introductory comments. First of all, thank you for the opportunity. Tim and I, when we speak about this, speak about, our careers have been over 40 years doing all sorts of things, but this is probably the most significant challenge and opportunity to do something that's going to have such immediate and great impact on thousands of people with disabilities and their families in Nova Scotia. So we see this as being a very historic sort of opportunity and historic time as well, because yesterday with the apology from the Premier, this is a pretty unique thing around the world. So this is a very, very special moment. Also to make comment that I want to acknowledge the strong and inclusive leadership that actually helped form the remedy after so many years in court. And so that sort of collective, inclusive leadership working together that's needed to take the remedy forward as well. So really important. And Tim and I and the other independent experts that had input into the remedy, we just want you to know that we've brought all of our wisdom and learning about the things that work, but also the things that go wrong. So we tried to bring that into the remedy as well. So, but there's nothing in the remedy that we haven't done and seen to work effectively around the world. So I'm now going to move forward to the remedy itself. I'm going to assume that people have at least had a look at the report, and we're not sure how many people also came yesterday. So we will do a bit of an overview, and also to say that yesterday Tim and I gave a very full introduction to the remedy in two presentations, and so that will then be available as a video resource to people as well. And so just quickly going back to about the remedy, so it's around systemic discrimination, and it's about a court decision in 2021. It applies to the province of Nova Scotia as a whole and not just to the Department of or just the Disability Services Program, that the Department of Community Services and the Disability Rights Coalition worked together to create the strategy, and also it's been agreed by all parties and will now inform how people with disabilities and their families receive assistance and supports. So so there are 4 areas of discrimination, just very, very quickly. One about unnecessary institutionalisation. Second, around the right to assistance, so people being eligible but not being able to access support. Thirdly, and very importantly, people having to leave their communities where they live to go to where the service has been available. And fourthly, people spending long periods of time on wait lists. And so just to say that the scope of the remedy is limited to those 4 areas, and there are other works of the department that will deal with other groups and other issues, but the remedy is tightly focused on those 4 areas. Just a little bit about just the process. So October, November last year, we in person and online, we met with a lot of people. We read all the documents, all the submissions. We ran many workshops, of which many of the people on this call would have been part of. We reviewed all the data to make sure we understood the full extent of the problem. Maria, through the Disability Support Program, set up a round table of government departments to make sure that we had all the other key government departments as part of the remedy. And then earlier this year, we were able to actually formulate the remedy, have it agreed by both parties, and then very importantly, signed off by the Board of Inquiry. And now we're sort of up and running. So really want to acknowledge that as an incredible achievement. So I'm just going to quickly go through the 6 key directions to just give you a sense of there's sort of 5 key directions, and then direction 6 is sort of like the underlying system sort of capacity sort of issues. And these will just give you a flavour for the scope of the work. The first one is around more intensive planning support and coordination strategy. The current system, we've got care coordinators that have got very large caseloads, have to deal with a lot of crises. They don't have the time they really need to get alongside people. And so we've sort of taken the current system with large ratios and caseloads and created 4 new streams of planning and support for people. We'll have local area coordinators based in local communities that will get to know people well and will be connected and will create opportunities for people in the local communities. We'll have another group called intensive planning and support coordinators that will work particularly to get people out of institutions or with people who are on wait lists with no support currently. We've then separated out another function around assessment, eligibility and funding. So the people that are supporting you for planning and coordination will be separate to the people that do the funding and eligibility decisions. And then the 4th stream, importantly, is we'll have some independent peer support for person-directed planning. Okay, so it's going to be a much richer and a much more personal environment. The second key direction is around closing institutions, or we'd probably say creating better life opportunities for the people that are in those institutions. We've got a 3 to 5 year time period for that. That'll be across all regions and will include people coming out of nursing homes and various hospital facilities. It'll be a combined process for all those groups. The key parts of that are the intensive planning support coordinators that will have ratios of about 1 to 20, so they'll really be able to work intensively with people. And then in our sort of regions, we will have community capacity developers. They'll be looking to develop opportunities for people and also regional closure teams. As well as getting people out of institutions, we're going to strengthen the emergency response capability to support people at home and in their local communities so that we don't sort of have people still going into those institutional facilities. Third key direction is, as well as people getting out of institutions, we want to create opportunities for people that are also already in the community, and we've got some key strategies there. We're going to beef up the home shared living arrangements. We're going to make it a lot more flexible. There's a big boundary between independent living support for 31 hours or whatever, and then you have to jump to a small option home. We're going to create a lot more flexibility with people's funding to use the ILS sort of framework to provide a lot more flexibility for people. We're going to look at people that are in temporary shelter arrangements and turn that into an innovation strategy and learn about how to best do that. We've got it's going to be a line in the sand for school leavers from 2025. There'll be no school leaver that will leave school without a plan that would have been developed at the start of that last school year. So that's what we call a line in the sand. There'll be after that, there won't be people leaving school without supports in place, which will be a huge benefit for the people involved, but also for the families. Key direction 4 is around starting to build allied health and clinical support. At the moment, it's sort of ironical that these supports are often based in the institutions and hospitals rather than in communities. So we're going to be rebuilding all that in local communities and in regional settings and working with health and mental health to rebuild that capability. And really excitingly, we're going to have a clinical lead or allied health lead in the disability support program to deal with those other departments. One of the biggest moves is key direction 5, which is the move to individualised funding. So if we want to sort of move from the current situation where people have to fit into programs and the money goes to the services to one where we can start to allocate funding to individuals and families so that we can build supports around people one at a time. So the funding needs to be a lot more flexible. So we're going to gradually move to a system of individualised funding and portability, which will mean people can take their funding anywhere in the province. To do that, we just need to build some of the infrastructure, the assessment tools and some of the systems to support that. We're going to build that through our regional hubs, and also we will be doing some further work around the supported decision-making, legislation and capability to support people making decisions about their funding. And also we're going to line up the work that we do with the work of seniors and long-term care. So we're starting to build one sort of simple, more coherent system. And key direction 6, this is really about the whole of the system. And I was commenting yesterday at the conference that the disability support program has been a small part of a big department, and we need something bigger than that to carry the remedy forward. So we're really going to strengthen the disability support program. So some of the key parts of that are a stronger governance structure. There'll be also independent monitoring of the remedy through the court process each year. There'll be work around leadership and capability, work around whole of government leadership and structures. There'll be workforce strategy, housing strategies, and also some strategies around supporting innovation, partnerships and transition. And sort of just also to say that Maria, who's the Executive Director of the Disability Support Program, has done an incredible job around ensuring that we understand the full extent of the population and we've got adequate resourcing for people to have an entitlement to good support as part of that process. So that part is also important. Sort of moving forward, if you have a look at the remedy, there's actually a plan for each year, 1 to 5 years. All the important things are set out in the right order. And at the part of the court remedy is we have to have targets, indicators and outcomes which will be monitored by the courts. That's incredibly important. There'll be some provincial advisory mechanisms, and there'll be advisory mechanisms in the regional hubs as well, and which will have advisory groups. Okay, so moving forward now, we've got a really sort of positive structure. So just next slide. I just want to look. It's not like without some key challenges. And perhaps the first thing I should say is other parts of the world are dealing with budget cuts of 10 to 20%. And if they were having this conversation, it would be about how we're going to cut everyone's support. So we've got this opportunity about, there's a huge opportunity of how we're going to manage all this growth. So, so some of the key changes. It's around a human rights and a person-centred approach, and it's about rebalancing the power, which was in the system and in the services. Now that's going to be transferred to individuals and families on a more equal basis. There's going to be a lot more new funding in the system to address the wait lists. We're going to build this capacity to get alongside individuals and families in their local community to do the planning and coordination. And really the whole narrative now is about a home and a good life in people's local community. That's where we're heading. There's going to be more focus on choice and control, particularly through individualised funding and portability. And that lines up really well with the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. We're going to be closing institutions and increasing the range of options for people to have a home and a life in the community. We're going to move from this sort of the centre of the world being the department and the institutions and the hospitals to more local and more regional sort of structures, which will be incredibly important. There'll be a government roundtable that will have a whole of province approach, and also there'll be a lot of work now about the workforce and the cultural changes needed. And for those that weren't there yesterday, Lorna Sullivan from New Zealand gave an absolutely fabulous presentation about the cultural changes that are going to be required. And so that video really clearly sets out some of the key sort of cultural changes from the current system, the way people work to the new system. So, so I'm going to leave that there and hand over to Tim.
Great, thanks, Eddie. So I'm Tim Stainton. I'm my day job, as I like to say, is I'm a professor at the School of Social Work at the University of British Columbia and co-director of the Canadian Institute for Inclusion and Citizenship. But more importantly, and I think that the lens that I try to bring to the work is I'm also a parent of a young man with an intellectual disability, and started my career working for a group of visionary families, mainly moms out in British Columbia, and where the ideas of individualized funding, independent support were really, these days we would say, the lab that developed these. And I've tried throughout this process to bring that lens to the work, and I know Eddie has worked most of his career with family organizations. Well, Eddie and I are the named authors. Anna and Tricia Murray were critical part of our team to develop this, and Anna as a parent. So I guess I just want to say to families that lens and that view has been the center of our work from day one. Because I know looking at the remedy and hearing all this, it seems a bit overwhelming, very complicated, but we have tried to keep families and people with disabilities at the center of our thinking while we've progressed this. So for today, what we really want to do is give families a chance to hear about the possibilities that the new world may bring, to hopefully give you some inspiration and some ideas, and probably most importantly at this point, some reassurance about the future. It's not going to be perfect, it's not going to be smooth, and it's not going to be instant. But the whole point of this is to give people with disabilities and families hope, and more importantly, the reality of a better life and a better future. So we want to give a chance to hear a little bit about what that looks like, but also give you an opportunity to ask the questions that are in your mind. And so we'll have a couple of opportunities for questions. One will be to our panel, which is up next. And after the break, we will open it up for questions to the panel or to Eddie and I about anything you want to ask about the remedy itself. The way we have to do that is through it's actually not your chat function, it's the Q&A button, which you'll see at the bottom middle of your screen. We would invite you to put in questions at any point. We have a crack team standing by to take those questions, and we won't have time to answer them all, but what they're going to be doing is looking for the themes in the questions, and then they will feed them back to us. So initially, we would ask you to direct those towards the panel members. You could either direct it to a specific panel member or to the panel as a whole. And then during the break, if you want to put in more broadly based questions or questions for Eddie and I, we'll come back to that in the second part. Okay, I think that's all of my housekeeping. It is always strange sitting here and not being able to see anybody. So I'm really hoping you're out there still. Yeah, and yes, so let's get into it. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about kind of the opportunities for families before we turn it over to our panel. So one of the key drivers and what people tend to focus on a lot is this transition to individualized funding. So I just wanted to be clear what that actually looks like. So one of the transitions will be every person served by the DSP programs will have an individual budget. So we will transition out of funding services to funding individuals. But that doesn't mean everyone will need to manage their own budget if they choose not to. So if you're in a shared service, you won't necessarily have to manage that funding. That can still flow directly from the DSP to the agency, but it will be earmarked for yourself or your son or daughter. So when you're not happy with that service and you want to do something else, you can take those resources that are designated to you and go a different direction that works for you. For a lot of folks, and we're going to hear about this from our panel and a little bit later today, there will be the option of you coming up with your own ideas and plans and using that individualized funding in the way that makes the most sense for your family and your son or daughter. The problem we've seen around the world with individualized funding is that it can, if done poorly, place an additional burden on families to manage that money, to hire and fire. So a key, what we call it a backbone support that will be developed, is a service that will help you hire, fire, put together contracts, and manage the employment side and the funding side so that we take that pressure off of families, but make sure the control stays with families. So I just wanted to put that out there at first. As my son has an individualized funding package, and we don't have a good support backbone in British Columbia. And I know, to be fair, more his mom than myself, it's an awful lot of work for her. So we wanted to make sure that wasn't what we were going to do here, is put an additional burden onto families. So the remedy has been informed by family, as said. The consultation process had numerous family inputs, numerous opportunities. Going forward, the new regional hubs, so part of the plan will be 5 new regional hubs that will be sort of the administrative center for DSP. Each of those will have a regional advisory group where families will have a voice at that group and be able to talk directly to their region about what's working, what isn't working. There will also be an opportunity for innovative plans and ideas. So each of those advisory committees will have, my old mentor Joe Dickey would say, a bucket of money that is low barrier access. So if your community or group of families say, hey, we have this idea, we want to try it out, that will be facilitated through these regional hubs and controlled by the advisory committee, not by the DSP and the administrative side. The main resource for family is going to be either a local area coordinator or independent planning and support coordinator, and they will be the person who is going to work with the person with a disability and your family to help you think about that vision, and then think about how do you operationalize that vision, and then to put together the resources and the supports to make it happen. So they will be, if you like, your key partner in this work with the DSP. And as I mentioned, a key part will be this backbone service to help you with finding, managing, and administering all the staff and funding. So what does all this mean? That we realize it's a significant change, and that's scary, and that rightfully will create anxieties. But we really hope that folks can get to the place where they see it as a significant opportunity, a way to really build a good life and a sustainable life for their loved ones and their family members. As Eddie mentioned, there's nothing in the remedy that hasn't been done and tried elsewhere. And as he also mentioned, we've also tried and screwed it up in various jurisdictions, and we've taken those lessons and tried to fix those problems in what has been proposed for Nova Scotia. So, we recognize that you have no reason to trust this process. So our hope is that we can earn that trust a little bit today, but more importantly going forward. But we also know, and as Anna said, and anybody who's a parent knows, the best advice and the best support will be that family support. So we really, we're talking to Inclusion Nova Scotia and other family groups to make sure that family to family, again, as Joe would say, the kitchen table kind of support and conversation is available to people to help you work through all of that. And lastly, this is not a one-off thing. It's a journey. It's not a destination. And what we want to do is help put the wheels on the bus for each of your family members' journey, and help that bus find a road that leads to a good life for them in their community. So to help with that journey, we brought in 3 folks to share their experiences that we hope will inspire, but also help answer some of your questions. And then once we've had our panel, we will shift back to the Q&As for the panel. And I would ask that only family members put in questions, as Maria mentioned, because this is a day for families, and there are other days for other folks, but this is for families. So I just want to bring in now my co-host for the panel, Barb Horner. She's probably well known to many of you, but Barb, do you want to say hi and introduce yourself and kick off our panel?
Sure, thanks very much, Tim. As Tim said, my name is Barb Horner, and I am first and foremost mom to MacQuarrie and Josh. And it was MacQuarrie who brought me into the world of disability 38 years ago. And I'm also a founding member of the Disability Rights Coalition. And so this has great meaning to myself, and the journey that we've been on in Nova Scotia for many, many years. Besides my children being my greatest teachers, like Anna, it has always been other parents, other moms and dads who have been my greatest mentors and teachers as well. And Tim mentioned Joe Dickey from BC. When the training centers were closing in Nova Scotia, the Nova Scotia Association for Community Living brought Joe Dickey to Nova Scotia to meet with parents. And Joe was probably one of my very first mentors from afar, and had the opportunity to meet with her many times at conferences and at workshops, and meeting other parents who have such a beautiful vision for their children's future can just change our lives. And so I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm thrilled to introduce our first panel member, Jane Gillis. Welcome, Jane. It's great to see you. Jane is a native of North Sydney, Nova Scotia, and has lived in Halifax since 2000 with her husband and 3 daughters. And while she's trained as a pharmacist, she feels she has an important role to play as a mom and an advocate. Jane first became involved with the Halifax Association for Community Living when her oldest daughter attended the Halifax Developmental Center in 2000, and most recently has been a board member of the provincial organization Inclusion Nova Scotia. Jane has a keen interest in advocacy, especially for those who cannot speak for themselves, and she believes that effort and time to pursue inclusion better society as a whole, and that systems and support should not dictate the direction of someone's life. Jane also believes there is a strength in gathering of families together. Jane, thank you so much.
Thanks, Barb. So welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining in on this Sunday morning. And I'm really happy to be here to talk to you about, my life with my daughter, Anna. I did do a slide. I don't know if IT can stick up a picture, but I have a picture for you just to give some context about who Anna is. So there she is. She's 25 this month, and those are her sisters, Madeline and Elsie. They're her younger sisters. So Anna loves friends. She loves family. She loves music. She loves the outdoors when it's over 10 degrees. She does require support, a significant amount of support, both with communications, personal care, mobility. And while Anna may not have a voice and the ability to express exactly what she wants for her future, I can say for certainty that she should have the same opportunities to live a good life in community as her sisters do. So since leaving school, Anna has had individualized support, and she participates in a lot of activities with her support workers. She goes to a music program, she goes to a day program, and she does other recreational activities like swimming and bowling and going to the mall. So I guess in some ways, some things typical of a woman in their 20s and some things not so typical. And I've spent a lot of time over the last couple of years thinking about Anna's future and honestly, as a parent, thinking about my future and trying to think about examples of what it might look like. And I've got to be honest, I don't have a clear vision yet what that looks like. But I think I'm getting closer. And I've had the opportunity, even recently in the springtime, to participate in Inclusion Alberta's family conference and gather ideas from other families. And I couldn't agree more that, families coming together does strengthen our ability to see things and see opportunities. So I'm excited, really excited about the changes and opportunities that the remedy brings to the table. I know families will have a lot of questions about it. But I really think it's going to be a positive thing for both families and individuals. So just to kind of set the stage, I thought I'd just share with you some things that I believe to be true or I believe in with respect to inclusion. So I think all people need to have choice and empowerment in their daily lives. And I think all people need to feel connected and need to feel safe. And I really have come to believe that relationships are what provides the greatest protection for our loved ones. And the key to happiness is through relationships and connections. So yes, support workers and the people we hire can have great relationships and build relationships, but I also see they play a role in building other relationships with our members. So not relationships only with paid staff, but relationships with people in the community. Segregation is a barrier to forming relationships. I really believe that in the community. And while there are relationships that form in segregated environments, I think we're missing out on a really rich opportunity to form relationships across community that everybody, we wish that for everyone. The next thing I believe is that systems and support should not define the directions of someone's life. Rather, systems and supports play a role in facilitating inclusion in community. And as families, we all need to have that vision of what is possible. It's interesting. Yesterday, I participated yesterday, and Lorna Sullivan was a guest that she did a fantastic job. And if you have the opportunity to go back and listen to a recording, if you weren't there yesterday, I would really encourage it. And I just want to talk about a couple of words that she said that resonated with me. She said, we are limited to what we currently know. We should be thinking about what we have not seen yet or experienced. And our default is more about our current thinking. So we think about, what's available for our family members, whether it be day programs or shelter workshops or, housing. And that's comfortable, but is it satisfying? And institutional culture operates when you think that what is already available is what is right. So those aren't my words, those are her words, but I think they were three things I jotted down that really resonated with me to start thinking sort of outside of what we already know here in Nova Scotia. So the one thing, and Maria, I point to you at community services and your people, I think that the remedy to be successful really needs to support a change in culture and beliefs. And Lorna talked about culture and beliefs, but I also want to think about culture and beliefs of how we perceive people with disability. And I really think it follows the medical model a little too stringently, and that disables individuals. There's a need for that greater consciousness about inclusion. We need to look at other societal movements that raise public consciousness. So we do not accept discrimination and marginalization based on ethnicity or sexual identity or age, and we shouldn't also think about people in that way because they're disabled. And I think consciously we all get that as a society, but I don't think we get it. And I think our systems are in place where beliefs form because of our systems. So, it's hard to change beliefs when the school system is still segregating children out of classrooms. And And I know there's a whole reason behind that. And I know it's a different department than community services. And I know, it has to be well supported to be successful. Anna didn't leave the school system that long ago. I also think, as a transitioning parent, where was I guided? Well, I was guided to sheltered workshops and day programs. So again, we need to change that narrative, and we need to, I love the draw the line in the sand at 2025, but that line has to change the narrative to the parents, because, we all believe that these are the best and the safest choices out there, but, that's because we're told that's true. And we have to look beyond that as parents. So how does the remedy support changing the culture? I think, it's Department of Community Services responsibility, certainly, but I also think as families, it's our responsibility too. We need to come together and support each other, and we need each other. And I'm not going to tell anyone here something they don't already know. Raising a child with a disability can be tough. It's really tough. And, we have to acknowledge that. When Anna was in school, our life was really similar to everyone else's. Everyone was busy taking their kids here and there, and that was regardless of need. So as a parent, I felt that when Anna was, wasn't the same as all the kids her age, we were kind of all in the same situation. We still, participated in school. We went in rec activities that were supported up to a certain age. She was a Girl Guide. Her birthday parties, her peers from school would attend. And, ultimately, all my friends were feeding and diapering and dressing their children to some extent. But my friends' kids grew up and they became independent, and Anna didn't. And while my friends now can meet spontaneously after work for, a beverage or a get together, or, get up in the morning, or maybe stay in bed and have a coffee and read the paper, I can't. And my responsibilities are different. So I just want to acknowledge that as families, we are taxed, we are burnt out. As children age, I think that becomes even more obvious and more apparent. And, I want to acknowledge too, for our loved ones to have the best life in community, it may look like a lot more work for us to have to take on, to, do all the great things everyone's talking about in the remedy, and individualized funding, and really getting into community. And that may look like a lot more work than what currently exists for us. And I think that needs to be acknowledged, that, there may be a little bit of work ahead for us. And it's not only the navigating piece, it's and I'm sure who said this, but it's the hiring piece and the dealing with the support workers. They don't show up for work. You have to manage payroll and all that. So I was really happy to hear yesterday and again today that there is a plan for a backbone system to be put in place with the remedy. And I think that's really going to be helpful. It's really hard to hold employees accountable. You have to build relationships. You have to build trust with them. And, sometimes the accountability piece isn't there. And that's really tough for us as parents. So I'm really happy to hear about that. And I think it is really a huge, important piece of rolling out the remedy. While I think we need support, I also think we need to participate. And I think individuals and families play a role, and a continued role as a partner in all of this. The model as it exists now largely does not welcome input. And, I think this has to change. And we need to listen to the individuals, as we have been all of yesterday. And we need to be listening today to the families. And, we need to be truly valued as allies in all of this in order for it to work. So in closing, I think a good thing for families to do is just think about one thing that your loved one loves to do and loves to enjoy. And chances are something in the community already exists that they can participate in. And we just need to be making those connections. We need to exhaust that ordinary space first. we don't need to be creating programs that segregate individuals. I think, if we think about where they could fit in community, the next thing we need to think about is what supports do they need to make it successful? I think that's the key. Where do we need to support individuals to make it successful in their lives? And with the right supports, everyone's going to grow. It's not just our family members. It's not just individuals. It's community as a whole. And I really, truly believe that. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jane. That was really powerful and a great start to our panel. So I appreciate you taking the time to share with us today. So we're going to move to one of your maritime neighbors now. We're going to pop over to New Brunswick, and I'm really pleased to introduce Dianne Cormier, who is someone I haven't met, but sounds like someone who I'd love to meet. She has quite an extensive bio, so I'm not going to read it all, Dianne, but I'll get the highlights here. So Dianne retired from a 30-year career as a life coach and counselor and educator. She lives with her husband in Bathurst, New Brunswick, and her 2 adult children also reside in Bathurst. She's passionate about inclusion and human rights. Dianne is dedicated to helping make her community, province, and country a place where everyone belongs and has the opportunity and support they require to participate in all aspects of life in their community that interest them. She's an active volunteer locally, provincially, and nationally. She is currently on the board of Inclusion New Brunswick, has been on the board of Inclusion Canada, so has a deep and long history with the family movement in this country. Dianne is most proud of her involvement with Ocean Ridge Support Services, a group of family and friends who have provided in-home support services 24/7 over the past 32 years to her 2 adult children so that they can live an ordinary life in a home that they own, surrounded by a network of family, friends, and neighbors, and supported to be involved in and contribute to the life of their neighborhood and their community. So welcome, Dianne, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Tim. And I actually did meet you way out in BC one time. I was out there, but I was part of a crowd. So I knew you, I know you, but you don't know me. But now you do. And Jane, you're the reason why I continue participating in the inclusion movement. I love hearing parents. I love hearing the stories, and I love hearing you inspire me. So I feel like what I'm going to say is going to be so little compared to what you just shared. But I have a big story. It's a 32-year story. So I'm going to share it with you. But before I do, I wasn't like Jane, and I didn't provide a picture, but I do have a picture. So I'm going to show you a picture of Robert and Lynn. They're all dressed up for Christmas. So this is a Christmas picture. They're the ones that get ready for Christmas real early, I guess. At least their mom does. So that's Robert and Lynn. Robert is 54. Wait a second. He's 57. He was maybe 54 in that picture. He's 57 and Lynn is 53. That makes me quite old, probably the oldest one in this group. Anyway, this was actually happening later in the day, I would have gone to their home and they would be part of the storytelling because it's really their story as well as mine. But they're busy in the morning. It's a busy time in the morning for them getting ready and meals and whatever. But they did give me the okay to tell their story or tell our story. So they live in their own home, and they've done, as Tim said, they've done so for 32 years now. And in the picture, you saw their smiles, and generally, Rob and Lynn are really happy people. And actually, their smiles will tell you more than what I'm going to say, how amazing their life has worked out for them. If I look off to the side, I'm looking at some notes, and it's a good thing I have them because I wander when I speak. So I'm going to try to stay on track. So Robin and Lynn have a degenerative condition. It's led them to actually require full assistance for all of their daily living activities, from the time they wake up and get out of bed till they get at bed at night, and actually during the night to get turned when they need to, because they'll call out if they need that. They have very limited use of their hands and actually need assistance with everything, even with eating, wiping their nose, and so on. Although they have all kinds of communication, they don't use words. They use their whole body, their face a whole lot, but their posture and the body language really speaks. So you really know if they're in agreement, if they're not in agreement, if they're frustrated, if they're happy. They sure let you know that. And so they're much more than their disabilities, of course. Lynn is a wonderful woman who her smile always lights up a room. She's a very social girl and loves meeting people. She's a fashionista of sorts. She loves clothes and, she's a woman. She's a girly girl. Loves getting her hair done, showing off her latest manicure. And she found her passion in life on the runway. So she has modeled yearly in various fashion shows all throughout our community since 2013. Of course, COVID interrupted all of that, but plans are afoot for fashion shows to start again in our community. And there's different organizations that have these fashion show. And Lynn is known as a model to be had, so she usually participates. Robert, on the other hand, he's a business guy. He loves taking care of business. He manages their household budget, and he also takes care of the bills and stuff, of course, with some support. He's actually the go-to person if you want to know who's working what shift to support them and what activity is coming up in the community that they might want to participate. But mostly, Robert is a sports fanatic. He's passionate about hockey and baseball, and of course, Montreal Canadiens are his hero. Not sure there are a whole lot of Montreal Canadiens here, but anyway, they are his. And we have the Teton hockey team, which is one of the. It's a hockey team that belongs to a large network. Anyway, he attends all the local games. He has a great time with his hockey buddies, and is actually already immersed in this year's hockey season. And much like you and me, they look forward to doing ordinary things like going down the street to pick up the newspaper or the mail, visiting with their neighbors, hosting get-togethers, running errands, doing their banking, going to the hairdresser, all of that stuff. And of course, they also they don't look forward to doing this, but they also have to because they're living independently, they have to take care of the housework, the laundry, the meal preparation, the yard work, And just recently, they've become pet owners. They're learning all about the joys and the responsibilities of owning a cat. His name is Chester, and he's sure bringing a lot of enjoyment to their lives. So let me tell you the story about how we got here and what factors contributed to making this all work for them. So actually, it all began with a dream that I had of an ordinary life. As a young mom, there was never a question in my mind that Robert and Lynn wouldn't have the same opportunities I had growing up. And what I mean by that is they would go outside and play with the neighbors, and they would make friends, and they'd have sleepovers, and we'd go camping, and they'd go swimming, and attend the neighborhood school, and so on. And that is pretty much what they did. But I was strategic also in when we did all of this. I always looked for opportunities to gather kids. Actually, our home was the place to go on a rainy day to do crafts and stuff. And I did that purposely so that they had all kinds of opportunities to get to know people and make friends, actually. It wasn't perfect. For sure, but overall, life went as expected. There were some obstacles that got around. And to speak to what Jane said, although until they went to school, they had quite a large network of friends, then in New Brunswick, we had segregated classes. We had special education classes. And it was really interesting what happened to the friendships once school started. It didn't take long for all of a sudden, even at a very young age, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, that the neighborhood friends kind of dropped away one after another. And I know now, I didn't know then, but I know now, of course, what that was all about is they had seen Robert at school and Lynn at school being in separate places. So I think that sense of belonging and connectedness really got broken. So we actually lived that. So of course things changed. New Brunswick is a leader in inclusive education. And unfortunately, Robert didn't access a regular class. He graduated in the special ed class. But Lynn, by the time she got to high school, or just before she entered high school, inclusion became a law in our province. That would have been in the 90s. And she entered high school in a regular class. Well, it really changed. And I really witnessed the difference. So if I just think about their graduation day, Lynn, when Robert graduated, I remember he was like, he wasn't known he actually was not on the stage. He was off to the side. It was really weird what happened. And when they pulled him on, people kind of politely clapped, but they didn't know who this young man, they'd seen him around the school, but they didn't even know his name. And I didn't expect different, I guess, so everyone was happy that he got his certificate. But when Lynn, so 3 years later, Lynn goes and gets graduated. Well, when they named, she wasn't off to the side, first of all, she was in the crowd. And when they named her name, like the whole stage exploded. I still get emotional when I think of it because it really spoke to that whole being connected and belonging. People valued Lynn. She was known. And to this day, people she went to school with interact with her. I don't know who they are, but they know Lynn. And they'll come up to her and say, Linda, remember. So so it's really important. On and off through the 70s and 80s. So I guess I want to start off with all of those first years and all the way into high school. I was a super mom. I did it all of myself. And it wasn't until in the late 70s and the early 80s that I found out about and attended some workshops. They were hosted by Inclusion New Brunswick and by Inclusion Canada. And that's where I met other families who had similar dreams to my children. I heard about and visited other communities across Canada. And like Barb, I found out about Jo Dickey. Like she was one of the pioneers back there. I also found out about individualized funding. I didn't know how that was going to relate to me, but it was good that I did see that. I actually saw how families were supported differently than in my own town or in my own province. So, but having access to this information and connecting to that like-minded people, they not only nurtured my dream for an ordinary life, because that was still there, it really strengthened my resolve to do whatever it is I needed to do to ensure that they were going to have every opportunity. But the reality of it is that I felt alone because it was me fighting against the world, always upstream, always going against the current, it felt like. In 1990, that was the year, Lynn's last year in school, I began thinking about their life as young adults and what they could do, what that life would look like. And like Jane, I was thinking about, so what would my life going to look like? Because all of my friends' kids were going off to university, mine weren't. Robert had graduated from school a few years before, and both of them were not interested in the sheltered workshop. They had enough of school. They didn't need to go to school again. They wanted to be out and about in the community, but there wasn't really anything out there that existed for them. And they even maybe even wanted a job someday, you know. I wanted them to have the same opportunities that I had to make a life for themselves. I wanted them to be engaged in directing their own lives. And I was their mom, so I was really kind of directing it still. You know, I wanted them to make their own decisions, not me having to decide a whole lot of stuff. And I wanted them to learn how to manage their own money and participate in whatever was going on in the community that interested them. I wanted them to continue to make friends and stay connected to the friends, and maybe even live on their own. But that wasn't, I mean, it wasn't a reality then. There was no such thing as individual funding. The only thing that was available were group homes. And of course, because of the needs they have, they need so much support. They actually wouldn't have qualified to enter those group homes. They would have probably had to be in a nursing home. Can you imagine a 20-year-old in a nursing home? Like, it doesn't make sense. But I remember thinking there was so much to do, and I couldn't do it alone, and I really felt overwhelmed. So I kind of stewed on that for several months, and I didn't know where to turn, really. I wasn't involved with the inclusion movement at that point, really. But at that time, my sister Janine asked me one day, and actually it was my birthday. She came in and said, "Hello, how are you doing? You know, blah, 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 happy birthday." And she said, "So how are you doing, Dianne?" And she really asked the question. And whether it's I sensed that she really wanted to know, or it's just that I needed to get real for once, I actually said, "It's not good." Long story short, she listened, and to my surprise, she got it, and she actually offered to help me. So Janine and I planned a meeting, because I had learned about that out in BC. You have to get a meeting of people together. I can't remember what they called it, but it was a network of some kind, a support network or something. So she reached out to the friends, the family, and community people that we knew cared about what happened to Robert and Lynn, and I reached out to Inclusion New Brunswick. I didn't know if they could help or how they could help, but I reached out. Back then in 1990, they had very limited resources. They only had 2 employees, in fact. But you know what? No, they provided one. They listened to my request, and that person came to our home, and with the people that Janine brought together, they facilitated a discussion about our dream and what was needed to make it a reality. So the support network that resulted, that's aunts, uncles, friends, and today cousins, has stood with us throughout the years. They're the same people that 32 years ago came to that meeting, and they engaged, and they continue to stay involved in Robin Lynn's life. At one point, we continued to explore as a group. We explored Robert and Lynn's transition into adult life, you know, trying to find a way to help them to live a life that was kind of like the kind of life you and I would want to have. So I thought, you know, I don't know if we're ever going to find a house, but our family home was actually adapted to them. It had been built to take care of their physical needs. So after discussing it with myself in between my 2 ears, because I owned that house, I decided, you know what, I'm giving them their inheritance now. So our family home, I gave it to them. I said, "Here's the house, you can have it, and we'll figure out something." So they became homeowners. That was kind of unheard of at that time for someone with that level of disability. Now, I'm not advocating that people do that, that you all give your house to your kids, but it's the way our family figured it out. And it had to do with where we were at that point. But I've never regretted that decision. I knew I could go figure out how to get another house for myself or an apartment, and that's just exactly what we did. So in the bottom line, it's not the house that made this arrangement work well, it's the support network is what made that independent living work well. It's that group that continues to be with us. So obtaining individual funding had to be the next step, right? Like, they had the house, but they didn't have anyone to help them be there. And of course, in 1990, in-home disability support, like, what are you talking about in New Brunswick? Like, what is that? You know, but of course I knew about this. I knew that out in BC, they had such a thing. And so it wasn't so far-fetched in my mind. I was naive that way. So Janine and I and the group prepared a plan, and we went and presented it to social development. Like, there was resistance at first. They thought, oh, Dianne, you're just, you're burnt out, you know, whatever. Like, are you sure you want to do this? And I said, yep, it's their house. They can't stay there all by themselves. They need some support. We need your help. So it happened. They agreed to it. And here's what they did. They agreed to give Robert and Lynn the monies that a nursing home would have received if they had housed them. And that was enough, almost enough money to make it work. But in turn, what social development wanted to do is, there was a young man who had a disability, who was aging out of foster care and needed a place to live. Actually, it was someone Robert and Lynn knew from school. And they wanted to know if they were agreeable to have them come and live with them. So Robert and Lynn agreed. It wasn't part of our plan, but it worked well, since the combined funds had made enough money to pay for all that 24/7 support. Now, of course, having the support and having a house was fine, but we needed more than that, because Robert and Lynn needed to pay the tax for the house and insurance for the house. They needed to pay for the groceries. They needed to pay for, you know, the everyday living expenses. So of course we had to negotiate with the government to make sure that, because, you know, when you go into a nursing home, you lose all your monies if you have any income coming from disability support. So we said, oh, well, they need to keep their disability support money. So we negotiated that. They kept their support money. So with the combined income, the three of them, they were able to take care of all of that, the household expenses, and actually have money to spend for themselves as well. So it was really important. It was, you know, this whole thing happened when I think our New Brunswick government was starting to understand that providing services to people with disabilities needed to change. They had closed down an institution, but they still hadn't figured out what do you do with adults. So everything worked well. It got put into place, and they began the business of creating a life for themselves. So they formed, that group of family and friends actually incorporated and formed a board, and they call themselves Ocean Ridge Support Services. That's the street that Rob and Lynn live on. And they're incorporated with the sole purpose of providing workers to support Robert and Lynn. Now, the monies that we got, at first, we had actually bought services from another organization. It was a group home. And we said, can we buy some support services from you? Can you share some of your workers? Well, it didn't take long, us doing that. It took us about maybe a year to find out that that wasn't working really well, because they had policies, they had organizational needs, and the monies that were supposed to be spent on supporting Robert and Lynn, all of a sudden, were going somewhere else. So it didn't take long for Robert and Lynn's network to say, we need to form a board and get that money and be in control. So for me, it was really essential that we ended up having that control over not only how the money was spent, but how the service was delivered, how Robert and Lynn was supported. And that continues to grow to this day. Like, you know, it's interesting. Tim said a while ago at his opening remarks, it said, this is a journey. Well, you know what? Supporting someone in a community is a journey. Just like our lives change, Robert and Lynn's change. So how we support them changes over the years, and it changes how we do it. I think we did a whole lot to them and for them at the beginning of them living in their home. We do a whole lot of with. Although they need a lot of things done for them, it's all done with them, no matter what. So when supper is on, or it needs to be is supper time, Lynn doesn't have someone bringing her supper to her. Lynn goes into the kitchen, gets her supper out of the fridge, gets it heated up. She eats pureed food, so she gets it heated up so that she prepares her own meals. So it's really as basic as that. But you know what? Having access to this funding dollars needed to be way more flexible, because it was pretty solid, like it was this amount of money, it was fixed. But their needs changed because their condition is degenerative. They needed more money because they needed more support, and they were refused. And my heart still drops when I think back to 2012, when they needed additional support because they ended up having some health issues and it was clear that they needed more support hours. We couldn't get additional money. No matter what we asked, it was always denied. So it was a terrible time, and really what we ended up doing is I ended up putting their name on a waiting list for a nursing home. It was the last thing that I wanted to do, but I couldn't see any hope. So, Rob and Lynn, they were 45 and 42, an age where they should have been preparing me to get into a nursing home, not themselves. But I'll never forget the day I got a call. It would have been maybe a month later after I filled out those forms. Someone called to let me know that a bed was available for Robert. And that call shook me to the core. It actually woke me up from the stupor that I was in. And without a hesitation, I said, no, we're not going to be needing those beds. Please remove their names from the list. Now, when I said no, I didn't have a clue what we were going to do to fix the situation that we were in. But I just knew that that wasn't where they were going to be. So I said, you know what? I called out to Inclusion New Brunswick way back in 1990, 2012. I think I need to call out again. So that's what I did. They came together with me. It took us a year. It was a hard year for Robert and Lynn, for all of us, but it took us a year and an 80-page document to convince the government, because that was too much of a concession. There was no way that was going to happen. I wasn't going to let their life get thrown out of the window. So here they are today. Money is tight, but they're frugal. They've been able to manage quite well. Actually, they no longer have a housemate living with them. He decided in 2015 that he wanted to go and live on his own, so he moved out. We renegotiated the funding again so that they could remain in their home. And Robert and Lynn are quite happy to have the house to themselves. They saved their money and they replaced furniture when they needed, or appliances. They borrowed money. They actually have established a really good credit rating for themselves. Robert is the one who usually does the borrowing. He's the one that takes care of money really well. They've really done really well with the upkeep and maintenance of their home, of course, with some help. My husband Ron is kind of a MacGyver of sorts. He's the free labor, for the minor repairs and the lawn care and whatever. And of course, I'm there with my creativity and the paintbrush. And Robert actually thinks that everyone should have a MacGyver in their life. And I agree. I have one. Because they're, because they're homeowners, and their income is low, they've been able to access some programs that made it really possible for them to continue also. So they access the yearly heating supplement. They get the property tax rebates. They also access the grants for accessibility modifications to their home and for the major house repairs that they've needed over the years. So they've accessed this as regularly as they needed over those years. And they've been crucial, really, to continuing living in their own home. They've had to repay some of these grants. They're not all upfront. Here's a grant. Usually it's a repayment rate that's quite low, and they've done really well with their commitments. They've certainly gained a sense of security and personal freedom that only comes from
Dianne, sorry to interrupt, Dianne, because this is pure gold and it's wonderful, but we're a bit over time, so just and we will definitely be swinging back to you in the questions, but that was absolutely wonderful and really appreciate that. And just for folks on the line, I think microboards was the term you were looking for the small folks that come together to support, and we can provide info on microboards to anybody who's interested. So I'm going to flip it over to Barb, and we'll come back to you in the Q&A. So thanks, Dianne. That was absolutely wonderful.
Yes, thanks so much, Dianne. I would like to just pick up on a point that Dianne mentioned. You know, it is not buildings, it's not bricks and mortar that support our children. So let's try to remember that when we are thinking about our kids' futures. The most essential piece is having good, qualified support workers who are steeped in understanding what it means to connect with community, to live in community, what inclusion is, who can be bridges for our children to connect with community. It's not about a building or a place. It's about the people that work with our children and have that value-based understanding for their human rights to belong. So I think that needs to be our focus. We need to ensure that there are programs developed so that we know that we're getting good people to work with our kids. So I will leave that with you, and would love to introduce Tabatha Bois, I believe. Hopefully I've said that right. Tabatha has been born and raised in Fredericton, next door to us in New Brunswick as well, and has been working with Inclusion New Brunswick and supporting social change since 2016. She graduated from St. Thomas University with a major in sociology, and has always had a passion for helping people achieve their goals and overcoming systemic barriers. Tabatha has over 12 years experience working in human services and government roles, including social development, child welfare, support services, and the disability community. For the past 5 years, Tabatha has been managing Inclusion New Brunswick's social inclusion program and advocating for supported living in community. Tabatha has a strong belief that every person has the right to choice, opportunity, and the supports necessary to access those opportunities. Tabatha, welcome and thank you.
Thank you, Barb. Goodness, no, I'm very excited to be here today. When Anna reached out and told me what was happening in Nova Scotia and the remedy, I was very, very excited to be a part of this and share some of the work that we've been doing at Inclusion New Brunswick. So I will do my very best to do our social inclusion program justice, just to tell you about kind of where we came from, what we're doing now, and what we've noticed, say, works, what doesn't, and some things that we've had to change as we've gone along. So I always enjoy talking about the social inclusion program. Kind of like Barb had said, I started my journey with Inclusion New Brunswick in 2016. It was the New Brunswick Association for Community Living at the time. And I've had the opportunity to see a lot of changes, a lot of growth, a lot of trial and error, as kind of we've mentioned, you know, through these stories. So I get very passionate, I'd say, about talking about this program. When I first started with Inclusion New Brunswick, I started as a frontline coordinator. So I was working directly with families and adults and individuals to plan for a home of their own in community. And I'd say at that point in my career, I really found my niche. I don't know where it came from, but just helping people, again, access those opportunities and help them navigate the system and the information that's available for families to help them create their vision and their own path for what they would see in community and see those come to fruition. It was very exciting for me. It's very rewarding work at the end of the day. So yeah, talking about our social inclusion program, well, we are all across New Brunswick. We're in our 5 major areas, Fredericton, Moncton, St. John, Edmonton, and Bathurst, and we do support rural communities in between. We support adults aged 17 to 64 to do just that, live in community independently. The program operates out of, I'd say, 3 major pillars is what we focus on. The first one being what Dianne had referenced, called personal support networks. Now, we start that way with individuals and families to identify some of those natural supports. So people that are already, say, in that person's corner to help them, again, bring their vision to life, bring their goals to life. Because what we understand as an association, and I think many people here today are aware of, is that if you are dependent solely on, say, paid services and supports, the sustainability of that plan can be very much in question. So the more network of natural supports and family and people that you have around you, people that care about the individual, is really going to be a major impact for the sustainability and success, I'd say, the plan moving forward. So we start with that. We start identifying individuals that would like to be a part of this plan. You know, who would like to be in this person's life to help those goals move forward. Another point that we focus on would be what's called community connections. That is done with our facilitators. What they do is they work very closely with the individual to help them identify their interests and goals. Now, that's really important because as an association, we do not support segregated activities, things like that. We start with the person. It is extremely person-centered, and it's based on the point of where they would like to go. So for example, if an in-person, said that they would like to join a basketball team, or they'd like to, see what's out there for a social group, we do not start with, say, those segregated activities. We start with what is already available in community. Where is everyone already going? And what supports does this person need to get connected to that said activity? So what the facilitator would do is they help that person bridge that connection, essentially. We help to identify where that activity group is happening in community. And we'll go a step further to help the person, as I said, connect to that group by introducing them to some the group. It could either be a call to whoever is hosting it. It could be a call to a coach to introduce the person, to talk about some of the things that individual would need. And then again, just to secure the supports for that person and help them have an inclusive experience at the group once they get there. That form of support is more short-term. Again, the overall hope is that the individual is growing capacity and they're maintaining natural relationships so that they are as least dependent on supports and services such as us included as much as possible. So then we hopefully phase out of that connection once it is sustainable and the person can go ahead and continue with that group or activity. Now, the third pillar that we work out of, and this would be one of the more complex ones, I'd say, and one that takes a bit more time, would be that planning of a supported living arrangement. Now, that happens with our social inclusion coordinators. So there's one of them all across the province there. And what they do is, again, they work directly with the individual and their family to help create the vision, the goal, and the plan for this person to be independent in community. We meet with individuals where they're at. People come with all sorts of levels of capabilities and interests and goals. We spend a lot of time helping the individual to identify where they would like to live. What does that look like in community? Are they close to things that they need to access, such as a bus route, the grocery store, their banks, friends, families, and whatnot? So they do a lot of navigating in community that way. But a really important piece, I'd say, what coordinators do in our association as a whole is develop relationships with government and different resources that are going to be necessary to make these plans possible in community as well. One of those being it was part of our social development, but is now their own separate entity, would be the Housing Corporation. So this is made possible by ongoing relationships with our Housing Corporation to look at our portable rent subsidies. Now, individuals that we support in community were very dependent on that. As we know, many of them were relying on the disability income, which is quite low fixed income. So majority of them would require those portable rent subsidies to move into their own homes. So by connecting with the individual and having those relationships with government, that was a really big piece that was needed for people to be successful in community. It wasn't to say that people cannot still access other options, again, depending on their situation, their life, where they're at. There were ways that we could be very creative with their plans, but I would say the portable rent subsidies was a very big part of the coordinator's work, and having that attached to an individual and then having them go and access their homes. For the planning that the coordinator would do, I'd say now recently what we've noticed in our program and how we've kind of shifted, especially since COVID, is the time frame I'd say it takes to develop these plans with families and individuals for a community. Prior to COVID, we had a bit more luxury of choice, I'd say, with what was available for apartments and living in community, whereas now just the current housing market and whatnot has made it quite challenging, but we're able to get still a little creative with how people can apply their portable rent subsidies. But our plans overall, it would take about a year to plan for these, a year to identify the supports, identify what other resources are needed, the area, make a relationship with the landlord, and all those sort of pieces that are really critical to the plan. Prior to COVID, we probably could have worked within the realm of about 6 months to have an individual move into their own home. But again, just as we've grown, we've noticed that the more time you do take with it, the more successful plans you're going to have. Because we noticed if, say, plans are rushed or individuals are very, we understand, anxious to get into their homes, maybe before supports are identified, and that you would have a bit of a harder time after that. So I'd say about a year is the benchmark for planning with individuals. Another big piece what we do along that planning is the coordinator will work directly with the individual, the adult that is looking to move into a home of their own. And what we're looking to do is really grow the capacity as best we can. We want this individual to be familiar with their own budget. We want them to be familiar with maintaining their home. So again, they're as least dependent on supports and services as possible. Once all of that is identified, we work with closely with what's called our independent facilitation team. It is another program that's offered through the association. And what they do is write disability support programs for individuals to have the supports in place for them to maintain their homes. That is based on need. It's based on the support that they require as a result of their disability. But again, it's the supports coming in are there to work with the individual and to not do for, essentially, with that person. What we've run into and what we've noticed with that plan, and again, this came from a number of options through the disability support program that was recently updated and allowed individuals to have more choice and flexibility within that program that made a lot of these connections and arrangements possible. For example, an individual could go into their home and they may only require an hour or so a week to help with, say, meal preparation. As they got familiar with, feeding themselves, they got familiar with taking care of an apartment, they got familiar with, their cleaning checklists. What do you do if you ever get locked out? What's your landlord's name? All those kind of things. So there is an intense amount of time that goes into planning that and getting the individual familiar with all that different information and resources that they would need to maintain their own home. We developed that philosophy, I'd say, of growing the individual's capacity based on a training we received from an association called Live, Work, Play, based out in Ottawa. They came to our association, did a presentation there, and they function under the principles of just enough support. Because what we noticed, again, as an association in our program, and just every single person I would work with, we're very keen to help. We're very keen to step in, and we want to help. We want to provide, the steps. But what we notice is sometimes that is providing too much support. We're over supporting individuals, and we were keeping them dependent on us, different support services, different systems that are coming into place. We weren't really doing them any favors at the end of it. So by shifting to these principles of just enough support, I'll list them out to you and what they are. What we do is honor personal autonomy. It is person-centered thinking. It's promoting greater independence. It's community-first solutions, authentic valued roles, always building bridges, assets-based solutions, and barrier-busting tech. So what we've adapted, what we've noticed is that a lot of the resources and information that we would require is already out in community. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We don't want to over-support people. What we need to do is strengthen the capacity of community and those relationships and bring people together that way. So that not only is the person not left dependent on the supports and services, but we're also in a place as an association that we can hopefully, with those principles, support more families. Because currently with the work that we're doing as coordinators, we do have a capacity max to be able to provide, the intentional support to families that we would like to, but it certainly does not meet that need. There are much more families that do require a lot more planning information that we can provide at this time. And of course, we're hoping to grow and expand just to hopefully meet that need. So by, by adopting to those principles, I've seen a lot of success even in the most recent years since we've adapted that. What we noticed was in our program, once an individual goes into their own home, we offer what's called monitoring. Now we're not a big fan of that word, looking to change it. I think monitoring is still a little person comes in with the checkboard, right, the oversight, and that is not what that monitoring provides. It was really to provide just the oversight to ensure that the person continued to have the safety and support and reassurance that they needed to maintain their home going forward. But what we're looking to do is structure that time that we were, again, monitoring individuals to continue to grow their capacity, to work with supports and understand the system so they can maintain their home in a more natural flow, really, after our support is done. So that's working rather well. We've had a number of individuals say complete the program, complete goals, and they no longer require support from us. We take a lot of time to help the individual understand the system, because there's a number of different systems and resources that individuals are tapping into. For example, income assistance. There's your housing program officer. You have your disability support program social worker. You could have doctors. They have different service providers. So we help the individual and the families navigate all of those different individuals and help them understand who to connect to for what. So that, again, they're growing their own capacity, they are becoming independent in this process, and they're really growing their own knowledge and voice and their own self-advocacy skills in this process as well. So again, a lot of this was possible through this program. Before I joined the association, our own disability support program was recently updated. It used to operate in a 3-bucket kind of system where it was you either required this amount of hours, this many, and you fit within that box. So they abolished the boxes, and then it was made more personalized for the individual to access the amount of supports and hours that they did require. We do offer what is called the self-managed supports, and that gives the family the opportunity to hire and work with and train their own support team. Now, I think we've all had a little bit of experience with that and trying to hire, say, the right person, the right individual to work with, your son or daughter to help them, again, achieve their goals. So what we do with that is we offer a lot of training and information to the individual and the family to help them with the skills necessary to do that, to navigate that. For a lot of individuals and families, being in that driver's seat is very new. It's very unknown territory, and it can be very overwhelming at times. So the coordinator, we work along closely with that family to help that pathway until that capacity is grown, until they have the skills necessary to move forward with their plan. Some things that we're looking to do in the future, what recently has come out is Inclusion New Brunswick has supported what's called the Inclusive Communities Institute. And this is it's meant to be its own separate entity, but what it is it's an institute that provides these specific trainings to ideally anyone that's looking to provide support to individuals, but it's focused on how to provide person-centered training, friendly language with individuals, the right to choice, supporting someone with their goals. So we recently launched that as a way to hopefully fill the gap of lack of training, lack of information that some of what we were noticing some of these service providers and support workers were experiencing. Aside from that, what we're doing historically to work with families to help address some of that training gap is coordinators will meet with the individual and their support workers the time of training. So we support with information around interviews. We help vet the individual. We help with criminal record checks, the social development, vulnerable sector checks, and the training information that they would need after that. Because what we noticed, again, through the disability support program is that by the time it left the department, and it got to the service agency, and then it finally got to that support worker that was going to be at that person's home, they weren't always necessarily informed on what was in this specific disability support program. So we noticed there's a gap there. They were not being informed on the person's individual goals, their interests, the long-term plan that was happening here. And we found that they were very much getting into a rhythm of your basic home support services as meal preparation, is the apartment clean, and do we need to go to the grocery store, essentially is what we're running into. So with a little bit of that oversight and a little bit of that redirection, just friendly reminders and additional training, people are much more focused on their goals. And that provided a lot of autonomy to the individual as well as the support worker coming through the door and helping them build that relationship with that person, because it put them in the driver's seat as well. And most times we notice with support workers is given the opportunity, they have a lot of ideas. They have a lot of creativity and a lot of thoughts that they'd like to work on with the individual. We just notice it needs to be encouraged, I'd say a little bit. So I won't go too far down the road, just being aware of my time here, down the road of some of the other gaps and issues that we've experienced there, but it is still certainly coming. There's still a lot more work to do in that realm, but with the relationships and partnerships that we've developed with certain private hire support workers and service providers, we see a lot more success, a lot more retention. Support workers are able to stay around a lot more and help the individual with their goals. And again, the natural relationships that we're seeing form outside of these support goals. So yeah, that's it. I hope I've explained the program as best we can. There's a lot more information that I can provide. Like I said, I very much enjoy talking about social inclusion, but I can veer off in different directions all day. So I very much appreciate the opportunity to talk today. Thank you.
It's great. Well, thank you, Tabatha. That was really, really helpful. And I think between the three panelists, we've kind of got a good picture of how families can navigate the new system and some of the issues. We are a little bit over time, but that's okay. So I think what we're going to do is I would invite you to continue to put questions into the Q&A. And then we will take our break now, but we will curate those questions and come back and start with some panel questions and then expand it out for questions for Eddie and I. So it's 5 past. Let's come back at 20 past. Sorry? Oh, yes, sorry. I'm being rude. I didn't give you a chance to give Tabatha her due applause. So let's give her a round of hands. Yeah, who knew the Australians were politer than us? Jeez.
Just say sorry.
I'll say sorry to Tabatha and thank you to Eddie to establish our Canadian cred here. So let's come back online at 20 past 11 and we'll dive right into the questions. So thank you to all of our speakers. That absolutely was gold for us here, and I hope folks at home are enjoying it and learning, and we will come back with the questions shortly. So see you at 20 past. Hi folks, welcome back. Hope you all had a good stretch and rested your eyes. So we're going to switch into the questions now. We're going to start with questions for the panelists, and then we'll switch off to some for Eddie and I to respond to. So we have a number of them that we've been curating. You can still send them in, but we have about an hour for questions, so we'll get as far as we can with that. But I want to start by going to the panel with a question that I think is one that I've heard since the beginning of my career. And does this work for some, but not for all? My kids' needs are too big, physical and behavioral. And maybe before I throw it to the panel, I'll just point out all of these, we heard Dianne mention and Barb mention working with Joe Dickey, all of these ideas around individualized funding, planning and support, they were actually developed for kids with the most complex needs, because they were the ones that didn't fit in. So in fact, really the genesis of this was exactly those kids. But I'd love to hear from our panel, and let's start with Dianne about how do you respond to folks say, well, this is great, but my kids have too complex needs.
It's a really good question. So what's really interesting is that in the past year, I've actually helped a family set up a microboard around their son who has autism and who doesn't fit the mold. So had a lot of issues, has been living on his own for a while, but was on the verge of being institutionalized, actually. And this family reached out to me and said, could you help us come up with a plan? And that's Inclusion New Brunswick was very involved in that. And so this young man, it's been several months now, so it's just brand new in the past year. I think that they've put it together. I keep in touch with the mom. We're Facebook friends, so I'm always aware of what's going on. And it's not easy, and it's not easy around Robin Len, but it's succeeding. He's a much happier man. Behavioral issues have diminished dramatically, and I think I would call it a success. So I would think he would be one of the ones that people would say, "Oh my gosh, he'll never be able to live in his own home," but he actually is, and he's doing quite well. So.
Great, thank you, Dianne. I wonder if Tabatha, I'm sure, has encountered this in New Brunswick. Do you want to jump in, Tabatha?
Yes, absolutely. No, I've met with a number of families that have connected or reached out when they were given, say, limited options, or they never thought that, these plans or this could be possible for their own son or daughter in community. And what I always say to them is starting again with their vision, helping them craft their vision and their goals, and kind of crafting out what their expectations are as well. So I have a lot of conversations around realistic plans, I'd say, in the reality and what they can expect when going into community. So I'd say with families, if it's, there's a hesitation or there's a real fear that this is not a possibility for your son and daughter, I'd say always be open to opportunity. Always be open to trying different things that you haven't tried before, or even if you did, if it was years, prior to, trying again or going about it in a different way. So I always say to families, with the disability support program, with giving that option of individualized and flexible supports, it really is possible. It really is, community, what families can do, and just seeing the different networks and people that have come together by trying, these different plans, they are possible. We've been approached by the department. We've been approached by hospitals for individuals, transitioning out of pretty complicated plans to put this plan together for community, because sometimes either the care homes or these other places, senior care homes and whatnot, simply wouldn't have the support or capacities to support that individual. So the only option left is community for those individuals and those families. So yes, 100%. I've encountered a lot of different stories like that with families, that it's just the need is too great. There isn't the support out there. But when you kind of put pen to paper and start crafting that vision and that plan, one step at a time, one bite at a time, it really is possible. I really encourage people to put the fears just a tiny bit on the side and start looking at some other possibilities and opportunities for their son or daughter. Because I've in my own experience, I've witnessed it. I've witnessed 24-hour complicated, complex individuals residing in their own home successfully.
Great, thanks, Tabatha. I don't know, Jane, do you want to jump in on this one?
Well, I think that was an excellent summary both Dianne and Tabatha presented. I think I would just say that as a parent of a individual that does have complex needs, that can't be left alone, that can't communicate, that does have behavioral issues, I am hopeful. And I think my vision includes community. I know my vision includes community living eventually, and I think we can do it. And I've seen lots of examples of it being done.
Great, thanks, Jane. I'm going to start with Tabatha for this next question, and then we'll go around again. So, struggle to find support, let alone a good match. Where do we find staff to do this? I'm sure that's been an issue for you in New Brunswick. So, Tabatha, do you want to kick us off on this one?
Sure. Oh, goodness, yes. So what we noticed in our province is that there was a gap in available qualified support individuals, and I don't really understand what had happened. Mostly after COVID, is we used to get at least a nice pile of resumes or people applying to these different support jobs, and then recently after COVID, they seem to have gone down. So what we really encourage families to identify that appropriate person is we help the individuals post their job ads. So we help them create that message and that image, and again, the vision for what they'd like to post those ads. Us as an association, we're not able to post job ads just CRA, it looks like we're the employer, but we're not, the family rights funding through their different support plans. But we make different connections and different relationships with where we think the staff could be in community. So for example, connecting with universities and their personal support worker programs, connecting with nursing students, people looking for, say, experience in that realm, and just tapping into different connections and maintaining those relationships has proven successful. A lot of it as well is word of mouth. A lot of it is families connecting with different people they might know, posting on their, say, social media, reaching out and having different, I'd say information on those ads is very helpful. Changing the language that you apply to those ads has proven beneficial, but as well the in-depth training. Once you do have that person, you want to secure them and have that retention of that staff, is having that formalized training, that input, that insight and oversight of those plans has proven successful. But we've noticed just typically posting to your Indeed, your typical job ads, you don't get as much success from those, but rather the individualized connections that you can make in posting, different student boards, different other boards in community, and word of mouth has proven successful.
Great, thanks. Dianne, you want to chime in on this one?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Thought you might.
Support workers. So what's really fascinating is, there's a staff of 8 people around Robin Lynn, 24/7. They do a lot. They do some one-on-one support sometimes, and sometimes it's 1-on-2. So it's a high, it's a lot of people to be looking for. So we really take care of the people that we hire. I think that is the secret. We make sure that they really understand the vision. We make sure that we know what they want to get out of their job. So that really matters, and it really works, because we actually have one woman. She should be retired now, 28 years of working with Robin Lynn, and she's still going strong. So that's a long time. She's in her 60s, going into her 70s, and she's still fully involved, and is one of our best inclusion people. She's the one that goes out to the grocery store with Robin Lynn and says hello to everyone. And it's like, yeah, it's one of our best workers. 4 of our workers over the years worked at least 25 or 28 years. So we had really good retention, actually awesome retention. Working in someone's home, if it's done well, is actually a really nice job to have. And the kind of work that they're doing, going out into the community, getting involved in all different kinds of activities, is also quite enjoyable work. So I think I would restate what Tabatha said. Providing the right support to the employees are really, really important. So the other thing that we did, we ran into a situation last year where we had 2 staff leave, and we tried our usual methods, and Robin Lynn decided they wanted to have their pictures. So Rob and Lynn are the ones that put the ads out. They said, and it really worked. Like, we had a really good uptake, and ended up with some beautiful people that are working with them now. It's I couldn't ask for a better staff. They really get it. They understand that they're not there as maids or servants. They're there to help Rob and Lynn live their lives. So they do everything with them as much as they can.
Great, thanks, Dianne. Jane, do you want to jump in on this one?
Yeah, sure. I felt the stress of trying to find someone to work with Anna and cycle through people. Sometimes you get youth that, great, but they're resume building. They're not going to be with you for more than a year. And I was having a struggle, and Maria, I'll share this with you. I wanted to pay more, which obviously when you pay more and you're capped, it decreases the amount of hours you have. So reaching out to my disability support people, I was told that I was paying too much. And I really feel that in this budgeting and in this going forward, we have to pay people a working wage, or else we're not going to get people that are going to sign up and choose this as a career. So I currently have somebody with me that's great. And this is her career. She's been in childcare and she's transitioned to disability support now. And it's very, it's her career, and she's very professional, and I think being able to pay them a bit more, and I agree with Dianne, creating the environment that's really good to work in. I think, and I think we have to do some behind the scenes work of increasing our programs to have people trained and have people available. I also think we need to have networks. Currently, there's nothing in Nova Scotia that exists that works. I know there's databases, RESPA databases, but they don't work. And you're left as a parent pretty much on your own to find individuals, and it has been tough.
Great, thanks, Jane. Maybe I'll just chime in quickly because it's obviously been an issue for us and my family as well. I just want to pick up on something Tabatha said, that we're shifting the landscape a bit, that this isn't about hiring the trained professionals with the things. Yeah, some folks are going to need that. Some folks are going to need more complex training. There will be capacity for you to do the training you need for your son or daughter, not a generic training. But the ability to just hire, so my son's favorite support worker is a guy he knew at school. Had absolutely no training in human social services. He was the coolest guy in school. He was the star of the football team, and Gus just loves him. And it's a great look on Gus when he goes out in town with the coolest guy in town, right? So it opens up that possibility, but recognizing that for folks with complex needs, you may need some specific medical training, lifting training, that sort of stuff. All of that will be available, and part of the plan is a workforce development plan, because we recognize that's a big gap. It's going to take time. Probably the workforce problem will never completely go away, but it's recognized in the plan, and we hope that will develop. But what a great opportunity for Nova Scotians that want to shift careers or want to change the way they work, and I think that's the message we need to get out. Okay, so let's move on. I'm going to ask one question specific to Jane, just to put you on the spot, but I think we did give you a warning with our sophisticated tech here. I wonder if you want to say a bit. I know you're Vice President of Inclusion Nova Scotia, is that right? And what kind of role you see for them in supporting families as the process goes forward?
I think it plays an incredibly large role. I think, as we've all kind of recognized and stated, that getting families together to share. In one of the questions, I was scanning the questions, somebody said, the whisper network, and that's what it is, like families connecting and whispering in each other's ears. But really, we need organized structure around bringing families together. And I think Inclusion Nova Scotia is in a bit of a rebuild. I think we're really fortunate. The walls don't end at Nova Scotia. We're a national federation. We can look to the learnings we have from other inclusion movements that are a little or a lot further ahead than we are, such as New Brunswick, Alberta. And I think that network of families is going to be really important. We have plans in the immediate future to bring families together and connect families. We've just started a family committee based to be networking. Barb Horner is actually going to be the chair of that committee. So that's really terrific, an opportunity to sort of reach out and hear from families and hear what they need and have that family voice, and I think that family voice is going to be necessary to get success. And I think that's the role that Inclusion Nova Scotia will play. And I know in the past, Inclusion Nova Scotia has conferences and they've gotten away from that. And that's our hope, is to bring that back and to play a role in our sector as a place where families can go to be supported. And someday we hope to have a Tabatha and lots of great services, and we're paying attention, and I think the sky's the limit.
Great, thanks, Jane. And yeah, and I think everybody looks forward to supporting and developing and working with Inclusion Nova Scotia to help move this forward. But okay, so we're gonna just shift the gears a little bit and open it up to questions for Eddie and I. We realized through the 2 days, folks, they've been able to send in questions, but they haven't actually been able to get answers from us, and that's not intentional. We do leave the province immediately after, so it's okay. But we're going to try to pick up on some of the questions we've been getting, but I'm conscious, just for the tech and stuff. Barb, I've kind of been leaving you out of the picture, and I'll bet you might have some thoughts on some of the things we've been discussing. So I just want to give a moment for Barb to chime in if she likes.
I'm, it's just really thrilling to be part of this process. I think we all learn and grow for our kids. We want our kids to live their best lives. And I think that we sometimes as parents don't recognize the value and worth of our own kids when we're living in that day-to-day, and are caught up in everything that comes with our kids. I think in a lot of ways as parents, because we haven't had a lot of choices, we tend to settle sometimes. And for us as a family who for almost 20 years in Nova Scotia received individualized funding and had an organization, a self-managed organization that helped us to manage that funding and help us find support workers, that option was taken away years ago. And when we were offered a small option home for our daughter 5 years ago, when she was 33, I feel like I settled for that service. And although she's receiving good care, for me, she's lost her place in community. And I want that back for her. So I want the families to feel like their children have a place in community where their brothers and sisters can see them as contributing individuals, having friends, having opportunities. I never wanted anything for Mallory that her brother Josh didn't have. It's just that Mallory needed a little bit more support to access everything that he had. She needs physical access, and she as well is completely dependent. I don't usually talk about her disabilities, but I too have a daughter who has 24-hour needs. She was supported at home. We as families, right, we support our kids in community at home. We do it as long as we can. And that's where they started out. So I feel like we are asking for nothing more than that they've always had. So I'm excited by this process. I'm hoping that Inclusion Nova Scotia can begin to provide more and greater supports. We are evolving as an organization. I'm looking forward to chairing the family committee where we can bring families together so that we can learn together, learn with and from each other, help mentor younger parents coming up, getting back into the school system to help our kids and help our families access the education that they need and want for their kids. I just feel that this is a huge opportunity for us. So I want us to grab it and run with it. And if we're not asking as families, if we're not there to hold government accountable, it might not happen. So we have to keep demanding. We have to keep sharing the joys and the beautiful benefits of our kids being part of community. Thanks.
Thanks, Barb. That was great. So I'm just going to switch over and ask a question to my colleague Eddie here that we had from the chat, because we realize we've thrown a lot of new language, new ideas out there, and it's very confusing. But at the end of the day, I think what families want to know, well, how does this work? What does the path look like? Who's our Tabatha? So we had a question. My daughter is presently in the Achieve program. We are just starting to get a sense of her future, and I'm feeling overwhelmed. My concern is after this, how do I access supports and navigate this? Will this be provided by DCS through our case coordinator? Can you walk me through how to begin this process? So I'm going to throw it over to Eddie to just kind of walk everybody through what we envision this might look like. So, Eddie?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Hey, so listening to all the questions, I just sort of wanted to come back to like the big picture where all the specific sort of issues sort of fit in. And if I went back to the scale of the problem that we're dealing with, you know, there's more than 1,000 people in institutions, there's 500 people with no service, there's many other people that are not getting what they want in their lives. So the challenge for the remedy really is about how do we scale up some infrastructure to achieve the outcomes that we need within this sort of 5-year period. Okay, so it's a progressive, because you can't do it all straight away. So it's a progressive rollout. So it won't be everywhere at the same time, but we've tried to build it pretty carefully. But I just want to talk to you about go back to the building blocks. Okay, and so one of the first building blocks is this individual planning and support coordination sort of function. And so at the moment we've got like care coordinators which are strained and stressed, and they've got large numbers of people to deal with, and they can't possibly do the personal, local sort of, you know, ongoing support for people. Under the new system, the basic network will be local area coordinators who will be based in local communities. They'll work with up to 50 people with disabilities. They'll be based in local communities, and they'll develop an ongoing, trusted, supportive relationship with people. They'll get to know people. They'll help people build their networks, they'll provide information, they'll work in community to create opportunities for people, and then they'll be connecting them to planning and any formal support that they need. So this will be the foundation across the whole province, every local community. The second part of this is all the people that are in institutions or who have got more complex needs, who aren't getting a service. The intensive planning support coordinators, they'll be working with up to 20 people. So it'll be much more intense and much more personal and much more connected. Now, the third part of this is that we'll be looking to fund peer and technical support organisations to support people with their planning. Okay? So we talk about families supporting families. Well, this is exactly what we're talking about. So that will also be an option for people. Okay? So really we're going to move from a world where it's hard to have someone who knows and understands you and can help you through this process into a much more substantial, personal, local, across the whole province infrastructure. So there'll be somebody working alongside you who's not involved as a service provider. Okay? Now, so from my experience, this is one of the biggest things that you can do. The second part of this is that we're going to progressively move to individualised funding. So as people come up with different ideas, there's going to be the capability to do things differently, okay? And linked to that is the individualised funding hub. So all these issues about finding support workers, managing your money, you know, all that sort of stuff, that's going to be supported in a way that will help that work effectively for individuals and families. There'll also be the new positions of community capacity builders, because what we do know is once you do work in local communities and regions, you're going to see the gaps. And so Tim was very strong on this, that when we're thinking about options that people want where they don't exist, we'll be looking to help build those in a structured way. And then just a couple of other bits, there'll be innovation funds. So if you have a bunch of families that have got a great idea about what they'd like to do, there'll be opportunities through those regional funds for people to start trying and doing things differently. And we'll also be providing transition funding to providers. to help them think about how they need to change. So really, I think there's some very powerful ideas here that when we start to roll them out, we're going to see a very different world. But the best image is you can have someone alongside you that will get to know you and will connect you to community and will stick with you, okay? And that's going to be the big difference. So then if we go to the specific question about Dianne and her daughter, you know, at the moment the question is who's going to help, you know, navigate, you know, options in the community. At the moment, you know, trying to get a care coordinator through the Department of Community Services is going to be pretty tough when they've got big sort of loads of people they're working with and crises they're dealing with. So in the short term, that may not change significantly, but in the new world, this is absolutely what the local area coordinators will be doing. This will be their bread and butter. They'll be alongside people, they'll take the time, and that will be a whole different pathway for people, okay? Which will mirror all the values that we've been talking about today, about getting to know people, their passions, their strengths, their networks, what's in community, as well as the link to any support that people might need. If I can just roll into, there was another question about the portability of funding and what does that look like. And so again, if I could just say that in the new world, and this is a world, I've been involved in building this sort of a system in my home state in Western Australia. So we've had this sort of system for, you know, between 20 and 30 years. So we've done this sort of thing. So the portability would mean that people would have a funding plan and resources that in fact you could move anywhere in the province. So you wouldn't need to move from one area to another and then have to re-qualify for anything, okay? It just goes with you. And what I would say under this new system is your funds, you know, if you're chosen to be supported through the hub, well, it's going to be a provincial-wide hub, so that would sort of go with you. And then if you'd have either a local area coordinator or an intensive planning support coordinator working with you, and as you moved, it would be a warm handover to someone at the other end, okay? And this is the big difference, is that this is going to be a lot more personal and a lot more local. So this might take two or 3 years to roll out in terms of these new positions to completely cover the province. But I guess I can say to you, this will be an entirely different world, okay? Where people have got different avenues of support for planning and coordination. It'll be more regular, personal and consistent, and it'll be connected to community, because that's the life that we want to build. We'll help people build for themselves and their families.
Thanks, Eddie. This is where we cue the theme for The Little Mermaid, you know, a whole new world. Sorry, couldn't resist. Yeah, and maybe I can just add a little bit that the core is with the local area coordinators and the IPSCs is that somebody's there when you need them, and somebody's there for what you need and as long as you need. But that's not the only route, right? As Eddie mentioned, if families get together, peer-to-peer support, peer-to-peer planning, that we really envision kind of a 100 flowers sort of system. So my family, I probably don't need a whole lot from a planner. We can put that together, and so there's a route for me to go right to negotiate the funding and get on with it. There's already a peer-to-peer pilot in the province for folks with physical disabilities, so ramping up those things. And the other thing I wanted to emphasize is and you guys on the panel have talked about this, that family-to-family thing is really important, and there's going to be lots of opportunities. So, well, you know, my son Gus is a super social guy. He doesn't want to live by himself, but he wants to be able to choose who he lives with and who supports him where that is. So there's opportunities in this system to say, hey, you know, John and Bob have been friends since they were in school. They both need support. We can't get enough money for 24/7 for one of them, but we can set up an arrangement that works for the two of them. Let's work with our LAC or IPSC to bring that in. So we really want to encourage that creativity, because the reality is the more we do in community, the less the department's got to fund, which means there's more money to do all this other stuff. So I just want to emphasize that there's no prescribed path. but there is always an available help. That's the goal here, if you like. I'm going to deal with just a couple of quickies. Someone was asking about the home share aspect and whether it's going to be like the Ottawa one or stuff. So home share, for those who don't know, it's the term we're using, but it has a lot of terms, life sharing, and it's the model where someone is supported in another family or couple or individual's home, who provides the day-to-day support, help with cooking, somebody who's there if they need help. And it's a model that it's actually the predominant residential support model in British Columbia by far. So we've modeled a lot of our thinking at this point on BC because they've developed literally by trial and error quite a sophisticated system of monitoring and support and community agency oversight. So family agencies, most of our societies for inclusion and stuff will oversee this. So I think that's the model we're kind of envisioning here, that will have a strong oversight, a strong monitoring, but allow that option. And to be honest, the beauty of that option is it solves the most intractable problems all at once. It solves housing and staffing. And so it's a model, absolutely no one will be forced into that model, but we think it's a model that will allow folks to get good opportunities in community fairly quickly. The other question was around the shared services program. So folks young adults who are in long-term care facilities, and about 400, I believe, was the number. So yes, it's already been decided that shared services program will continue, and it will gradually integrate into this broader system. So, and not only will it continue, it will hopefully ramp up fairly rapidly and get more of those folks coming up. So that's the quickie. Go ahead.
Yeah, and maybe just on that, because I think that the principle there is if you've got people who require the support from different government departments, that government departments can work together. And so I just wanted to flag that in the area of mental health related disability, that we've got a heap of work happening around partnering with the mental health and addiction system to jointly find ways to better support people in the community. And so that'll involve allied health and clinical support, as well as, you know, the support of people's personal networks, and also the other sort of paid support in people's lives. So I just wanted to flag that this is a sort of a joined up whole of province-wide strategy as well.
Okay, I'm going to throw one back to the panel now, and it's kind of an interesting one, and I think our panel is well suited to answer it. Can you talk about the impact this journey has had on women and moms? So I'm going to start with our moms. So Jane.
Well, it's a good question. I guess I'm fortunate to be in a married situation, but I do take on probably the lion's share of the responsibilities for organizing and executing. I don't want to be stereotypical, because I'm sure there's other situations that aren't that case. So first off, I feel like it's on families. My two children play a big role, and my extended family plays a big role. I lean on my brother and sister, their children, and they lean in as well to support me. So I think while, you can say it's going to land on the mother, I think if that's what the question's about, I'm not sure, but I think, we have to push that along and count on the supports that are out there, so that it just doesn't land and become something that we're fearful of as moms, as the female in the household.
Okay, thanks, Jane. Dianne, do you want to jump in on this one? I expect you have something to say on this.
Oh my gosh, yes. So yeah, as a mom, and I think as a mom for many women, we tend to do the caretaking. We tend to do the heavy lifting on that. What's really been the best thing that ever happened to me is having that group around me, having the sisters and the cousins and the brothers who help with the decision making and help with the support around Robert and Lynn. So, so for the first 20 years of their lives, I did it all. And I sure found out that I couldn't keep on doing that. And so for the next 30 some years, I actually have done it with people. And so anytime we have to do any kind of anything around Rob and Lynn, that group, they lean on me, I lean on them. And we all lean in together to make sure that Rob and Lynn have a really good life. So yeah, I might be the key person there, but I certainly don't feel as if I'm lifting. I feel as if I'm part of it, not doing it all.
Thanks, Dianne. I'm going to actually ask Barb if she wants to jump in on this. And
So evidence-based research has always shown that moms have carried the heaviest burden, that many moms have to walk out of the workforce to support their kids, especially when they're in their school years. We know that's factual. So I guess as it was for me when MacQuarrie was in school, and because we insisted she be included in the school system, I had to find part-time work so that I could be on call available for her to go to school when needed. It's unfair, it's unnecessary, and I'm hoping that with the remedy changes that is going to change for moms in the future.
thanks, Barb. Now, Tabatha, I know you're not here as a mom, but I don't know whether you want to jump in on this.
Sure. No, I didn't mention my little bio there, but I'm not a parent for an individual with a disability, but I am a daughter of a parent with a mental health disability. So I have supported my mother through a few situations, I'd say, in her journey. And I think what has helped me the most is educating myself and informing myself on what is available and what is out there in community, so I can help her access and navigate different things that she had to access. And then speaking from just my experiences working with, the many mothers that have, kind of come through the doors, we do prioritize senior parents. I don't know if I mentioned that before in our social inclusion program, but very similar to questions, right? It says, well, what happens, if there's, not support identified, and what happens, with the work that the family is currently doing. And I think the trends that we're seeing here is that there is power in numbers. There is definitely support there. The more people you bring into your circle to lean on for that support, it just disperses, that responsibility, I'd say, for different families. And I've seen the physical change in mothers over time when taking that approach from every phone call that we might have, everything was a crisis. There was huge situation every single time because stress was just so high. They were at a place that very close to burnout where, following some steps and again, growing our own capacity, bringing in numbers, I've seen the change. Oh, it's just incredible. That 1 year can make for some of these parents that are able to go on a weekend vacation. They're able to go out and do things that they never would have thought possible because that worry, right, of who's going to be there to care for them. But when you build those trusted relationships with your own network and your family, I can't explain it beyond that, I guess, but I've seen the physical change in the stress, I'd say, in the happiness, the morale with that family that we work with moving forward. And it's quite powerful, I'd say. So, yeah.
Great, thank you. Maybe just follow that up a little bit with another question we had that is really a community question about, if you're not connected, we still see a lot of older families that have done the job for decades. The kids are at home, they're 85, the kids are 65, and they're not connected into those networks. They're not connected with other families and sort of stuff. So the question is really, well, how can we reach out and make sure that that happens for those families? Because I can't remember if it was Anna or Barb or Maria who said it yesterday. This process is a partnership. It's not DSC doing this, and it's not going to work if it's them doing it. It's a partnership between community and the government. And to my mind, this piece is the community's responsibility. So I just like to give folks to comment on, what can we do? And I know you've talked a little bit about it, Jane, but what can we do to make sure those particularly the older families who are rightfully going to be scared, like, if there is no institution to go to, what's going to happen to my daughter when I die? And that's a question everybody will face at some point. So how can we reach out? How can we connect? And how can we support those families who often don't have the time to connect because they're full-time caring? So maybe we'll start with you, Jane.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great observation and a great question. And I'm not 85 yet, but I'm already thinking, what's going to happen when I die, and I want things to be in place, and I don't want siblings to be burdened, if that's the correct term. So yeah, it is, and that's why I really believe that making family connections and having opportunities to make family connections is key. And of course, I'm going to put a plug in for Inclusion Nova Scotia right now, because that's an organization I went to. I went to it in really when we moved to Nova Scotia and my child was young, and I didn't even know how to navigate the system. And I landed at Halifax Association for Community Living, a community living organization. And there I found my people. And I still, like when Anna was about to graduate, I called up one of my people, one of my dear friends that also had a son with a disability. And I said, what am I going to do? I'm scared to death. Like, I'm just headed towards nothing. And, we worked together, and then I met more people through, networking. And I know everyone has busy lives, and, I don't have full time to dedicate to this. I work full time in addition to being a parent and such. So, I appreciate that people are busy, but even connecting into an organization that can connect you with other families is a starting point. And I think having those conversations has really relieved a lot of, I think I'm prone to anxiety, and I think being connected with families has relieved a lot of anxiety for me going ahead. And I always looked at it honestly, yeah, it's not going to work for my Anna. Like, your kids all talk and they can make choices, and mine doesn't. And, Anna's going to be left out. And, I was really fearful of that. But since I feel like I have hope because of those connections I made with families, like I said, in Alberta, and families that I, have known since preschool. And I think that really matters. And I would encourage people, I know it's hard, but to reach out. And even one connection is more than being isolated. So I think it's a really important step.
Great, thanks. Dianne, you want to jump in?
So that's a really hard reality, and it's there, and you can't take away from it. So I think there's two things. I think what happened around me was something kind of natural and organic, and it wasn't a really hard thing to get people around, Rob and Lynn, but that's not the case, like you said, for everyone. So in my mind, there needs to be something set up that would help structure that. But you could start at something as simple as when a social worker is contacted because a family needs help, because usually it's a crisis that's happening. To me, I know in New Brunswick, they still don't do it enough. To me, those families need to be hooked in to the inclusion movement. They need to be hooked in so that they can get in touch with. It can't be just the community doing it. It also needs to be all of the different government departments, whether it's mental health, whether it's the social development, whether, doesn't matter where. I think that we need to stop working in silos and start introducing everyone to everyone else. That'll help. But I really also think that for some families, actually networks are going to have to be structured around them somehow. And I don't even know what that would look like, but I think it's not all going to happen the way it happened around Robin Lynn. But I believe everyone is connected to someone in the community somewhere. So I think there's a starting point somewhere. But I think it's going to take some kind of an organization or structure to make all that happen. Families won't be able to do it. So that's going to be a key piece, I think.
Great, thanks, Dianne. I'm guessing Barb might want to jump in on this one.
And I am an older parent, but I do recognize that there are parents older than myself who still have their sons and daughters at home with them. So I think we reach out to them with deep respect, with an understanding of their lifelong commitment that they've made to their children. I think we help them understand the possibilities, to share the success stories with them. We do this one by one and step by step. I don't know how else we can do it. But again, I agree that if we, with Inclusion Nova Scotia, if we can begin by doing that step by step with parents, and older parents and younger parents, we have so much to learn from each other.
Okay, thanks, Barb. Tabatha, anything to add to this one?
No, really, just worth saying, what Jane Day and Barb had said there. We've had, for Inclusion New Brunswick, we've had a few networks for families. And it is just that I think keeping people informed and keeping them connected, it goes up and down. It really does with interest, I think, of families being involved and connected. We do offer family retreats as well once a year. That happens that families are able to attend, that we're able to that we're already connected with, and it's a retreat. They share a ton of different information and that kind of thing. Work with families on that level, but definitely getting the information out there, I'd say, and letting families know that this is available. That places and associations such as like Inclusion NB exists is proving challenging. It really is, because sometimes we'll meet families that they had sometimes they have no idea that we exist, and by the time they get to the door, they're experiencing crisis. So it's definitely beneficial to start your planning, your knowledge early, for sure. Then you'll have a lot of traction under you, but and you'll hopefully avoid some of these crises that can occur. But it is just that, I'd say, families networking and coming together, and it could be just that. It could be called that formal family network. It doesn't have to be complicated beyond that. But I'd say for a movement such as this, it'd be beneficial to have them connected, share that information, have everybody on a newsletter, an information stream, what have you, to keep that interest and that uptake and keep everyone informed. I totally agree.
Yeah, great, thank you. And maybe I could just chime in for a bit. I think there's some resources you can draw on in New Brunswick and other places. In BC, we have the micro boards are a great source of support for other families. The Family Support Institute, Plan, some of you will be familiar with Plan, which is a family organization. So there's models we can build on here in Nova Scotia, but they have to be their community's job, not government's job. Okay, sure, I'll let Eddie jump in here.
Hey, just sort of on this, I think one of the things we were talking a lot about yesterday was really this sort of foundational concept of what a good life is for people, and the importance of valued relationships and security for the future. And we've heard a lot of the speakers today talk about the importance of the family, the friends, the support network, as well as the paid supports. And so I think we need to embed this sort of foundational concept that relationships are the key to a good life, and they're the key to what keeps people safe into the future. And so, and to give you an example, I did another presentation yesterday about like these building blocks to planning and sort of building the option of your own home and life in the community. The first building block before the planning stuff was really building a network of family, friends and supporters. And so getting more people around the person before you even plan, because that gives you a bigger idea of possibility and it gives you more people to take things forward. And so I think this thing about like recognising the importance of relationships and then systematically trying to identify, build and support those and then sort of bring that into the planning sort of process. So, and as Tim says, there are different ideas about how to sustain those, ideas around circles of the support, the microboard networks, there's the Planned Lifetime Advocacy Network in British Columbia. These are just different ways that people have thought about families being able to sustain safety and security over the long term. So, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Eddie. We've got time, I think, for about one more, and I think I'm going to address multiple ones here because it's come up a lot, and it's a fair question, and it's a lot of families said, well, you know, we're happy with the institutions. Our son and daughter are happy with the institutions of the large group homes. You know, we work to get into a small option home. Why do we have to move? So I'm going to have a go at it, and then I'll turn it over to Eddie. Firstly, the small option homes, the current ones will not be, they're not on the plan for closure in the first 5 years. So if that's where you are, your son and daughter is, that's not going to change in at least for 5 years. We did recommend that they don't build any more, because generally the best practice, if you like, anytime people are living in a congregate setting, it limits their choice and freedom. And so we want to move away from that, but in this initial tranche, it won't include the small option homes, but it will include the larger facilities, I'm always getting the acronyms mixed up, the RCs and the ARCs and the RFCs. RCF. The NHL will not be closing. We can all breathe a sigh of relief. Yeah, and it's a good question, and really, it's a place where we're just asking you to trust us. If you look across the world, if you look at the stories we have from everywhere else in the country, as I mentioned yesterday, Nova Scotia is now virtually the last place with significant institutional support. And for 40 years, I have seen butterflies come out of those chrysalis. And we have stories upon stories of how people blossom. And yeah, it's scary because there is, I would call an illusion of safety with the institutions. But the reality is that that's an illusion. Statistically, we know that abuse is much higher in congregate settings. So when people say, well, how are you going to make sure my kid is safe? We can't do that now. And we can never guarantee that, but at least if you have control, if families have control, people are in relationship, the main thing that prevents abuse is connection, is relationship. If somebody's coming in to see you every day, how you doing, Eddie? I'm going to notice the black eye. I'm going to notice that he's not happy. So the more we can build connection and relationship, the safer all of us are going to be, right? Whether you're someone in a domestic violence situation or someone with a disability. So I know that's partly that just trust is on this, but I think if you give your sons and daughters a chance to grow and flourish, they will surprise you. And that's what you're asking to kind of trust. I can't prove what's going to happen to you. I can't guarantee it. But I think you'll find they'll surprise you. Okay, so we got a couple of minutes. I'm just going to give Eddie a chance to chime in on that one, and then we'll probably need to wrap up.
Yep, Tim and I enjoy this, sort of bouncing off each other a little bit.
Yeah.
Hey, so I go back to the remedy is a remedy around human rights and discrimination, right? So, and one of our terms of reference for the remedy was it must align to the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, okay? So if you start from a human rights perspective, there's just 2 points I want to make. One is, if you talk about choice and control, choice and decision-making has to be informed decision-making. If people have a limited range of options, in fact, they're not having all the information that they should properly have to make an informed decision. So there is a role here in terms of people being exposed to different ideas and different possibilities in order for them to make an informed choice, okay? And so choice is a really easy word. It's much harder to make it informed choice, okay? And the second thing is, I think if you look at the UNCRPD closely, there is the concept that choice means more than having the choice of only one option about where you live, okay? And so by definition, people having just one option does not really comply with the whole idea of choice and the intention of the convention, okay? So I guess I would just sort of, I always try to go back to the basic principles, and I think those 2 basic principles are pretty clear.
Okay, well, we're doing well time-wise. We literally have 30 seconds for each of the panelists to say a final word, and I'm going to hold it at 30 seconds. So, Dianne, go.
The worst one to ask. First of all, I guess I just want to say thank you so much for inviting me to be here. It's I always, I came here, you wanted me to contribute. I've learned just as much as I've contributed, I'm sure, if not more. So it was wonderful. And I'm wishing you all good luck. Nova Scotia, you're on the right track. Keep her going.
Tabatha, go.
Yes, no, thank you so much for having me. I was very, very excited, very happy to be a part of it today. And I'm really hopeful for, yes, province of Nova Scotia on the direction you folks are headed. I'd say it's a lot of work to do, but it's with the experiences that other provinces and whatnot and that people are practicing, you're definitely headed in the right direction. I can see some really positive things happening for yourself and your family. So kudos to Nova Scotia for moving forward with this remedy. Looking forward to it.
Thanks, Tabatha. Jane, go.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak and participate today. And I feel a sense of hope, and I think we have a lot of work ahead of us, but I think also we have clear direction because of the remedy. And I'm really excited. I want to connect with families. So if you want to connect with me, reach out. And I want to work with people and really make this work. It's time, it's overdue, and I'm very much excited. So thank you for the opportunity today.
Great, thanks, Jane. And maybe in the write-up thing, we can provide some context to Inclusion Nova Scotia and some of the others for folks that want to reach out. All right, Barb, last word, 30 seconds, go.
Let's do it. It's a dream of mine. This is what I've always wanted for my child, my kid. Nothing different than her brother. Hopes and dreams can be realized. We have the huge opportunity. Please come together. Let's work together. Let's network. Let's be strong community for each other and to support our government to do this for us. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks to all of our panelists. We know this was short notice and a little bit bouncy around, but you were all fabulous, and we really, really appreciate you sharing your knowledge and thoughts with us. I'm going to end our bit with one of my favorite quotes from the German poet Goethe, and I love this quote, so I'm just going to share it with you. It says, "Whatever you can do or dream you can do, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Begin it now. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Maria and Anna.
Wow, thank you to everyone who spoke today, to all the questions that came in. I really am thrilled to be part of this discussion, and I can deeply appreciate the concerns that people have. And I think that that's part of this process, is how are we authentically having some of these tough conversations and helping to move us forward. So as I said yesterday at the sort of day one of the main conference, this is a really important conversation, but it's just the first conversation. There's going to be many more to come. And to just reference us back to the theme of, whoa, I am mirrored, I guess, there, to rebuilding hope. I have hope, and I think we need to hold on to that hope. And I hope that this has contributed to family's sense of hope for what the future holds for all of us. So I was just glad to connect with everyone today. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Anna and Tim, and I'm actually thrilled to get the last word in for once. And thank you to our outstanding panel. It was just so compelling when I think about the theme for the conference, which was Rebuilding Hope. You all supported us in rebuilding hope and shared, the possibility of imagining better and a better future for persons with disabilities in Nova Scotia and their families. And to be honest, as the executive director of the Disability Support Program, I actually found it kind of liberating in the sense that I don't have to have all the answers, and I shouldn't have the answers for your family. That really comes from you and your loved one and your family. So it's kind of liberating. I mean, it's scary too. The system is controlling, and it can be controlling. But I think if we open our minds and imagine better, the possibilities are endless. So Jane, thank you so much. I appreciated getting the Nova Scotia perspective. And I really, I was just thinking about your daughter, Anna, and how you've been succeeding in spite of the system. So I think about, imagine if there's a different system and a different way forward, what's possible. And I look forward to working with Inclusion Nova Scotia and partnering. I think there's a lot of possibilities to support families through Inclusion Nova Scotia. Dianne, I could have listened to you all day. Really, you're such a trailblazer. You dared to imagine better, and you exploded so many myths about living in community and what's possible. And that was before we even, way ahead of your time. And then Tabatha, you provided some really practical supports and programs based on strong values, though. They're practical, what Inclusion New Brunswick is doing, and it's so aligned with the remedy. Maybe some different names, but the approaches are very similar. So in closing, I just want to thank Barb for chairing, Eddie, Tim, and Anna, our dynamic team. The tech support people, believe it or not, we've got a whole team over here from Encore making this all happen, and and some other staff people as well. But most of all, I want to thank the families for supporting your loved ones every day and for joining us today and holding hands with us as we move forward into a new and better future. Thanks so much.